Good evening, everyone. I am Tina from TruePush, and TruePush Talks welcome you all to the event, which is important to all of us. Today's agenda is to discuss the possible solutions and emerging growth opportunities for corporates and startups who are trying to cope up with the COVID scenario. TruePush Talks is a webinar series from TruePush, and it's a customer engagement platform currently serving more than 15,000 plus global brands. It provides free push notifications, and we are coming up with many other potential tools for customer engagement. So if you have a website or an application, you can simply integrate the code and start sending the push notifications and engage your users for free. So I'm glad to introduce you all to the speakers. We are joined by Rama Iyer, CIO T-Hub, Abhijit Kumar, founding partners at AHA Ventures, Rohit, co-founder at Darwinbox, Devashish Ghosh, VP and India HR head at Barcadia, and finally our moderator Gopi Krishna, business program manager at Microsoft. He's also an SLP member. I would like to thank our partners who have helped us immensely to reach out to the right audience and all of you. Our partners are AWS Activate, Startup Talks, and SLP. So I request you, Gopi, to take the session ahead from here. Have a
Cool.
good evening to everyone.
Thank you, Tina. It's great to be here, and welcome again to the panelists and the audience. In these extraordinary times we have been going through over the last quarter, the shift in our lives, in our livelihoods, and in our social cohesion has completely surprised us, right? The resilience which we've demonstrated and the way we've stepped forward, both individually and in local groups, to take care of each other and others who really needed our help, especially when traditional institutions could not, brought about a very renewed faith in society, at least for me. We even got a glimpse of our environment. Can it be? What could it be if we change our lifestyles just a little bit? But while individuals and the social bond have borne the brunt of this impact, businesses took a body blow. In this webinar, we will explore how businesses have coped with this shift in the economic landscape. How are startups and their supporting ecosystems and corporations dealing with these situations? No company had ever had to go through such drastic changes in such short periods of time. How are they coping? What changes did they need to make? Rohit, can you take us through the 3 weeks from mid-March, how things shaped up at your company, what happened?
Sure, Gopi. Thanks for having me, first of all, and thank you everyone for being here. I think one word summarizes most of my 3 weeks. It was clueless, right? So I think when we started off, we were at least ahead of the curve in terms of going for work from home. So the first thing that we had in our mind was the safety of our employees, right? Because we didn't know how big this was, how bad it was going to get. And luckily, being like a digital native company, we had the opportunity to be completely work from home without really getting affected in terms of our day-to-day operations. So this is around March second week, we went work from home. We did this as a trial. We said, okay, let's do this for 1-2 weeks and figure out whether we can do this or we need to come back to work, etc. And we were doing constant surveys and all of that to figure this out. Most people, and interesting anecdote is most people said we want to come back to work. So we had a 70-75% preference of working from office, and this was before the lockdown and all of that, right? So 75% of the office said we want to come back to work, we don't want to work from home. The interesting part of the anecdote is we did this survey 2 weeks back when the lockdown was pulled up, and 75% said we want to work from home. I think it's a combination of finally having figured out how to work from home and the paranoia around how the scenario outside is, which is fair. I think we still continue to work from home as an organization. But going back to those 3 weeks, I think what we didn't assess at that point of time was how this is going to affect business, right? Because for us, actually, we are almost a reflection of the whole business ecosystem in the country. Because I mean, for most of you who probably don't know Darwinbox, we are an end-to-end HR technology platform for enterprises, mostly in India and Southeast Asia. These are the 2 markets that we cater to. And our clients include companies from across the sectors. right. So there's a strong presence of internet companies and internet giants on our platform. There's a strong presence of pharma companies, manufacturing companies, healthcare companies, real estate companies, automobile companies. So a wide range of sectors that we were looking at. Luckily, so we were not exposed to one sector where we had a clear view saying this is the problem, right? Like I think retail, travel, tourism was very in the first weeks. But beyond that, we were not sure of how the other sectors were going to get affected. So we were in a place where we said, okay, how bad is this going to be? So two things we kept in mind. So one was new businesses, and one was our existing businesses. And we focusedly looked at both of these businesses in those 3 weeks, and we said, what's going to happen, right? Because we had a huge pipeline which was in the mix, and this was towards the end of March and start of April. Generally, what happens is towards the end of the financial year, most of the sales happen, right? So there's a huge increase as per an average sale per week in the last week of March, because a lot of people want to exhaust their budgets, they negotiate till the last week and all of that. So that's how enterprise buying happens. And we lost that week completely because of the lockdown. Not that we couldn't sell in that time, but a lot of companies were in the same boat as us, which is clueless, right? Which is saying, tomorrow, I mean, do I have to take this decision now, or should I wait to figure out what's going to happen before I take that decision? Right. So it was always that push and pull, saying we talking about digital at that point of time, and they saying, okay, it's a budget at this point of time, right? So if you look at how that panned out, I think most of us now strongly believe in the acceleration story of digital, right? Like a lot of people are talking more about it. What is also heartening is our clients started using our technology a lot more than they used to, right? We saw like a 20-30% significant jump in terms of usage, because now everybody was working from home. They needed technologies which will tell them where somebody is working from, how do we catch up with people, how do we engage with people, how do we track productivity and all of that. So suddenly we saw usage go up, which gave us confidence that this is a story that will play out in the long run, where a lot more people will use the product. But what was obviously concerning was around how much of new sales will get affected, how much of our clients who are existing users will get affected because of this. So when we looked at existing business and new business, so new business, we told ourselves this year, and this is towards mid-April, we told ourselves that this year might be slower than what we expected, but in the long run, this is going to be stronger, right? And on the existing business, I think what we did is then we went sector by sector across our clients. We have about 350 clients, and we took each sector and said which of these sectors is going to get affected, right? And how affected, right? So we had clients who were airlines, and we knew that was going to be they're going to be deeply affected. They're going to be layoffs. There'll be tourism companies or hotel companies which might go belly up and all of that. So there was that sector, and then there was the pharma and healthcare sector, which we knew would grow. So what we did was we basically actually assessed all our risks. So this is what happened towards the mid of April, where we started getting a sense of this lockdown is going to be longer, one, and second, businesses are going to get affected, right? We are going into a slow year or a survival year in a way. So that's where we started assessing what the risks are, assessing in terms of our existing business, right? So there will be clients who will reduce their headcounts, who will reduce the usage of our product purely for monetary reasons. And there'll be clients who will actually increase it, right? So there might be solutions that are features on the platform that can help increase this, right? So towards the end of that time is where we also started innovating ourselves. And till then we were clueless, right? So the first 3 weeks, we were just trying to hold on to what we have, trying to close the last deals in the last stage, and also the conversations that are happening on customer success, implementation, etc. We were holding on very tight. Towards the third week, we got a better clarity on saying this is going to be a year where, okay, Corona is here to stay, right? Vaccine is nowhere in sight. It's not like, because we also had we were impacted by this in February itself in Singapore and Indonesia and Malaysia, right? So these three countries were impacted before itself. So we saw that maybe that is going to happen in India as well. So we were like, okay, this is how it's going to be. What is it that we need to do now to, one, maybe survive, and also maybe thrive in these times, right? Like, is there something that we can bring out on the platform that will help enable new sales? And that's the thinking we started with. So we did a little bit of work on our GTM, right? So before we used to talk a lot about, let's say, the performance management or the higher order performance management features. Now we talked a lot about cost, right? We started talking about how we can help improve cost, ROI, and all of that. And second, we said that's the GTM part of it. Second, we looked at the product and said, what are the features that people will use in the new normal, as to say, right? So work from home is going to be there for a longer time. Are there features we can build? So broadly, those are the areas we thought about in the 3 weeks. So I think we went from being clueless in terms of what to do with only the focus on employee safety to understanding what's happening with our business and what we need to do with our business. Yeah, that's been the 3 weeks for us.
Thanks, Rohit. That must be some journey, right? To be able to compress what most people would go through over months into, or even years into weeks of crisis. Rama, could you share your perspective from T-Hub? With the lockdown started, how did T-Hub continue to do what it does?
Yeah, thanks, Gopi. I think thanks for having me here. Obviously, just to kind of take a leaf from where Rohit left, I think we all have been hit by this. So not that anybody was expecting what will happen, but I think we'll have to pick up our pieces and move forward, right? So I think for us, it is all about primarily startups as the audience in terms of whom we would like to help and take their story forward. And we absolutely are doing whatever is possible from our side. But I think the realization is, you can only do that much from outside, right? As a startup, it's a journey that you have started and you need to kind of continue. And there are challenges, right? Whether it is capital, customers, investment, and Abhijit kind of mentioned that obviously you're not going to kind of, get those valuations in the past just by projections or future businesses. You need to show unit economics, you need to show profitability, you need to show much more because this is a buyer's market now. So I think there is a lot of pressure and challenges, but I think we are trying to kind of dig in deeper and we are telling the startups also the same, that these are challenging times and these are the times that you are born for, right? Not like a corporate where you have a cushion. So I think you need to kind of show your mettle now and let us know where we can help. Talk to more investors, talk to more angel guys, talk to more grants, funds of any sort. We're also trying to help them with debt capital with many of our banking customers whom we work with. So we are trying to kind of put all our armory onto the table and see who can pick what and just kind of stay above water, right? We're telling them don't do anything fancy, don't try to digress too much. Quite some people are jumping into this opportunity in the COVID that has arisen, which is fine. But I somehow believe that you need to kind of stick to your core value prop, what you started with, and then kind of go deeper into that rather than just be opportunist and jump. As a startup, I just kind of don't fall into that class of school which believes that. So I kind of tell the startup that give it more time, be aggressive, hustle, whatever you got to do. But don't kind of just put it in the back burner just in the interest of making money. I'll do something else and come back, right? Doesn't help at all. It just kind of goes out. So those are some of the things that's happening on our side. Okay. You're on mute.
Thanks, Rama. I think first time I heard the virus market, I don't know if you've heard it from as well. I'm taking it from you, and I'm going to quote you on this one. This is really, really aptly put. This is a unique market situation, and we'll call it virus market. How is everybody adapting to it? I think, Debashish, for you in the corporate environment, this must have been a transitional experience, right? With folks from so many different geographies, etc. How did the employees handle? How did that those 3 weeks or 4 weeks from mid-March pan out for you?
I think it has been such an interesting journey, Gopi. We're into financial services that we deal with between the investors who invest in large dollar amounts. So we have access to a lot of financial data, financial information that we research on. We have been in Hyderabad for the last 18 years. And for the last 18 years, employees have been telling us that can we work from home? And we kept telling them, no, you cannot work from home, right? It is not secured. We deal with very important financial data. And I have been telling this to my employees for the last almost 3 years. I've been working with Berkadia now. And I think mid of March, there I go, I stand in front of the employees and say, guys, you know what? From tomorrow, you want to go and work from home, right? It was unbelievable. We did not have the right technology to, so to say. When I say technology, it can also mean hardware and software, right? Because if you do not have a policy of work from home, even if you want to, you don't have the laptops for those. You can't, you don't have sometimes the right monitors. So technology was an issue. Um, you know, the culture in a way was an issue because you never had that systems and processes, right? How do you measure productivity? How do you measure performance? How do you track time? We never had that. And then all about leadership. Our managers did not know how to manage people virtually. So everything we that needed to be done to run an organization differently, we had to do that, and we had to do that like almost overnight. But I think what worked well for us is that we saw it coming some time back. That you know what, we cannot stand our ground, be adamant and stubborn, and say that this won't be happening. We saw it coming, and I think March 23rd was when the lockdown started in India. 2 weeks before, we actually did a testing for all our employees. And on 16th of March, so 1 week before the lockdown started, we are actually working from home. So the day the lockdown happened, it was kind of business as usual for us, right? Because by the time we actually have caught up on the productivity, we had actually kind of taken care of the initial hiccups about technology and how to do the initial stuff. So that way, for us, that big decision was had to be taken. Once we took that, I think it is a lot more easier right now. How are the employees taking it? Honestly, I would I would echo what Rohit said. Some of them are saying that can't we come back to office? We work with a lot of millennials. They like to have this conversation in the corridor. They like to bump into people, surprisingly have those discussions. They like to work with people. Some of them also don't live in their own, well, they live in hostels, so to say, right? Live in PGs. So for them, office is everything, right? They want to come back to office for the social life as well. And anyway, you don't have social life at all. So we're not in a hurry. We obviously are taking cautious steps. We don't want to put risks, health risks to on our people. We want to make sure that our offices are completely ready to start working, and then we will, then we'll look at that. We had a town hall last week, and our CFO and CEO has actually announced that at least for the foreseeable future, the right to refuse to come to work to office will be with the employee, which means that if you do not feel safe and if you do not feel fine, comfortable to work from office, we will not force you, right? So that's the decision that's been taken. But at the same time, we are working to make sure our premises are ready, our infrastructure is ready, so that we are prepared for the new normal, as they say. So pretty exciting times really, and we're learning a lot as we are going through the days.
Thank you, Abhijit. Thank you, Devashish. You've touched on a part in culture, and I'll come back to it in a moment. But first, let me ask, Abhijit, this must have been a shock, right? With the sudden shutdown, all growth plans suddenly need to be redone, and future uncertain for your startups. What was the conversation like at the office at the beginning of April?
So, talking to, I would talk more in reference to the startups, because please ignore the noise of a baby in background if there is any. Sorry. So, startups have to be more careful now, as the lot of cash flow planning has to happen. Investors have now become more. Investors have now become, as as I was mentioning before, a lot of investors are now looking at high growth rate, which was anyways an expectation from startups. On top of that, they are now looking for profitability also. So it's become like I would say a double hammer for startups. So you have to grow at 100% year on year also, and that again you have to become profitable also. So the startups are going to have a very tough time for the next 6 months, 1 year, and they have to focus on strategies to save cost, not waste money on unnecessary kind of marketing reduce their cost only on essential services. Even the investments are moving towards startups which are more digital oriented, where the processes are more digital, where the workforce can operate more digitally, maybe only 10% feet on street and maybe 80-90% digital. So I would say that digital also works very well. Digital, when from the time we have moved digital, we have presence in about 20 cities now through various venture partners. It's much easier to get them online now compared to when everything was open, because nobody would be free at a particular point of time. Everyone either is traveling or busy with some work. With digital, it's very easy. At least out of 20, 15 can come online at any point of time. So, and it saves a lot of our marketing costs, because previously we used to do a lot of pitch days, physical pitch days, events, to interact with investors, startups. Now everyone is used to virtual pitch days, virtual investor calls. So I think people are getting used to it, and a lot of these startups need to also get these habits into picture. Avoid physical interaction wherever unnecessary. I would say physical can't be stopped for a lot of businesses, but if you don't need it, don't do it.
I think that's the shift that we're going through, right? And you're right. I mean, Peter Drucker said, "Culture eats strategy for breakfast." Is it true, or is it too early to tell yet? Based on what's happening right now, with painstakingly drawn out strategic plans, hurriedly drawn over to be made up, new strategic plans coming up. As Rama had also mentioned earlier, startups are looking at way to make some money during this period just to be able to survive and get through it. How is the organizational culture helping or limiting the organizations, right? Both on startups and corporations. But before we hear from the others, Abhijit, how are your startups handling this? Can you share some examples of difference, how the differences in cultures have impacted in how they are coming out through this?
So a lot of our investee companies are now, as I said, trying to re-innovate on their processes. Now, a lot of them had very old style processes and very, physical contact driven processes. Even sales and marketing was heavily physical. Now they are trying to learn, and, for a digital company, it's easy. For a product digital company, it's easy, as Rohit said, that for them it might be easier, but for a startup which has very strong physical presence, and where sales and marketing was totally dependent on physical activities, they are now moving heavily to remote working. They are trying out new tools to move to a collaboration platform. So the people who were never I would say willing to move to these platforms are now trying, Microsoft Teams, they are trying, Slack, they are trying, Zoom, they are trying. A lot of new tools they are trying. So it's the necessity of the hour. So that's a big shift we are seeing. And also the customer experience, customer selling, customer survey, everything is moving online. So previously, a lot of these startups used to meet customers to take their feedback about their product, about the services. Now we are pushing them, or even they are trying to move all these processes online as much as possible. So as I said, wherever the contact points are not required, you have to cut it down to save cost, and even defer employee salaries if employees are okay with that, reduce salaries, bargain with customers, to maintain the current contracts, so that at least you don't lose the current contracts, whatever way possible. So a lot of negotiation happening. A lot of investors are actually now very sensitive, and they are holding their money to invest in their current portfolio rather than trying out new companies. So that's why new startups will have much larger problem, because most of the investors are keeping the money for maybe more investments if their current portfolio startups need. And that's what we are also open to. If any current portfolio startup is in trouble, we will try to help them money in the current situation.
Absolutely, that's interesting. That makes sense too. And Rohit, you've shared earlier about how the team also went through the shift of preferring to work from home, and now kind of preferring to work from office. Now, kind of thinking maybe work from home could be the way to go. Can you share some more examples from your startup in terms of how, from a culture perspective, organizational culture perspective, how is the individual handling it? How is the team handling this?
No, I think so. There are two, three areas specifically that work happens, right? So fundamentally there is customer-facing roles, which could be sales, marketing, account management, and then there is the product roles, which is product and engineering kind of thing, right? As a culture, I think one thing that we've been very very focused on is having the customer first. While we said it out loud, we've been calling it out, and everything else was business as usual, right? So you talk about it a lot, and then there is business as usual. You don't experience it as much unless such a scenario comes. And this was such a scenario where we could experience that, right? So most people, and we used to feel, and again, this is a very wrong notion we had, was everybody was doing their work to because it's their job or it's their KRA to get stuff done, right? Like, so whether it is implementation, customer success, all of that. But during these times, most of our team actually called up our clients to ask how they are, right? So in the first 1 2 weeks, they were very very worried or concerned about their own, I mean, their client safety and how the client business was doing, right? A lot of clients had called us directly, who they knew us, and said, I think you've built a great team, which actually is concerned about us, right? This is not something that we directed them to do or anything, right? There's no need to do that, right? We were there to help out if they needed some technology interventions or support or do certain implementation. But the clients, I mean, the team themselves actually called up clients to find out how they were. And these were not just clients, right? These were also prospective clients who probably they had conversations with over a certain deal that was happening with them. Might not be clients today, but we were talking to them at certain point of time, all of that, right? So that was super heartening. And for whatever we've done to maintain or build that culture, we're quite happy about that, right? It's more a success of the team than us building that culture. But I think that was something that was fantastic. We had leadership folks coming in and telling us, hey, are you sure you're okay? If you need a pay cut, just let us know, right? Again, that's showing high levels of ownership that's there. So these are things that come out. I think the culture part, the biggest displayers of culture come out when there are tough times, right? And I think some of that came out very well. But I think also on strategy, I think while culture eats strategy for breakfast, I'm also a proponent of strategy in a way where you should have a strategy for any kind of scenario. I think that is something we should not discount completely, right? So for managing this situation, we are expected to have a strategy, and we should have it, right? Like, and we should think about how to manage the next 6 months, next 12 months, next 18 months. Are we thinking about new products that will be helpful? Are we thinking about better ways to go to market? Are we thinking about better ways to manage clients? All of those are things that we can't go, I mean, we should not wish away, because we have to actively solve for it, right? And I think one of the things that some of our investors have rightly told us is, are you openly thinking about attacking the market at this point of time, right? While you're thinking about survival, and it's great, right? Like, and it's, I mean, well appreciated that you're thinking about cost, you're thinking about profitability, you're thinking about money in the bank, all of that, right? But are there opportunities where you can attack the market, right? Can this be an opportunity for you? Is something that you should actively think about. There might be no answer, right? Like, sometimes there might be no other way to do this, and survival and making sure we're good is something that our employees are safe and the money is in the bank for when everything comes back to normal, is something that is there. There is another anecdote which one of our client CEOs told us, and and this is a 50-year-old company, large conglomerate. They said, I mean, we go through this very often, Rohit, every 10 years, so as to say. And when markets are good, we look outwards. When markets are bad, we look inwards. And that's another thing that it stuck with us quite a bit from the start, right? So market is bad. What can we do internally to make us better, right? That bit of code refactoring which we had to do for a long time, can we do that now? That bit of trainings that we wanted to go through, should we do that now? So some of that also was helpful in this time. I mean, that brought us together. So we did solve this together, right? We said, okay, let's clean up. right? Whether it is code, whether it is processes, whether it is documents that we need to do, let's do those as well. So some of that has definitely been extremely helpful.
Thanks, Rohit. Um, Rama, can you share your thoughts on this too? You must be seeing a lot of different startup with different business culture or different working culture, right? How are they taking it? How do you see any variations between them? Uh, what kind of culture would make it through this kind of scenario?
So I think obviously, right? I mean, every team is different. Every founder is different in some way or the other. Obviously, other than the common factor that is, the one of hustling, the one of taking risk, the one of trying to like go against the wind and wave. But still, I think to everyone is his own, and I think that is where they take a different path, right? And it is just that someday you just get up in a different mood, and then you just keep aside all this strategy thinking, and you know what, I need to do something today, right? I need to make a move. So again, like at the end of the day, we all are humans, right? And given these kind of situations, really like test the metal, test their character, and there's nothing wrong in that, right? I mean, you can say that, you know what, today let me make a change. I don't know what that change is, right? And as Rohit was saying, either some people may just kind of look internally, do code refactoring, make their product better, so that when the market is open, I just go full throttle. For some, it may be like, you know what, I need to raise something, right? So I'm ready to kind of go down the market, like bargain, go to Abhijit and say, you know what best can I get, right? Which is also fine. Then there could be somebody else who would say that, you know what, let me spend more time with my customers. Let me just say, you know what, I'm here to help. I'm not even expecting anything. Don't buy my product. Don't pay me or anything. I just want like your time and feedback. I mean, you have time at your hands. I have time. Let's kind of get on a call. You just use the product. Have some of your people use it, and just tell me, hey, where are we missing, right? What are we not doing right? And to Rohit's point, these are places where you can go big on feedbacks, iterate your product. You never have the time. I mean, you never have the time as a corporate. Forget about like startups are 10x the order. You always have your plates filling and overflowing, and so you never get the time. So I think these are times to kind of get some of those prioritization and the features right. It's just so different, right? Wish there was one way to easily kind of sum this up. Many of the startups, especially who haven't like reached the maturity or stage that say a Darwinbox is, everybody is kind of struggling to kind of ensure one, they live to fight another day. Two, to ensure there is some traction either with the customer, because obviously investment is not happening anytime soon. It's going to be very, very prolonged. It is going to be very painful. So you cannot push that. That's not going to happen. You will just kind of come out feeling very desperate, right? And that's not a signal that you want to give out. So I think these are times where you build the product, you look at customers, you look at market in a much more detailed fashion. Don't lose hope. I mean, worst case scenario, like your startup may fold out, which is fine. You don't let that like fold you up. You don't let that crash you. You kind of get up and say, you know what, I'm going to do one more. If this didn't work, so what, right? So I think you want your spirit and your character intact, and just take it like one round at a time, like as in the boxing parlance.
Thank you so much, Rama, for that. I think you've touched upon the investment part. I'll come to that in a moment. But let me ask Devashish, startups' natural game is to be flexible, to be agile. But what about the corporate organization? How is your team handling this? How is the larger Brigadia team handling this? How is the culture and how are they adapting to this unique situation?
Gopi, I think if there is ever any time that culture is important, it is now for organizations, right? It is always important, but never more important than now. And I told you earlier, right? I see organizations simply put stands in 4 pillars, right? You have people, processes, technology, and culture. See, during this crisis, what has happened, Gopi, is that I think people have mostly figured out. I'm not talking about startups; they obviously have different challenges. I'm talking about corporations like us. We pretty much figured out, all of us, how people, process, and technology work. Right? Culture is something that's would be a key differentiator when we come out of this crisis, or for us to come out of the crisis. Because I think depending on how strong your culture is, right, you would have to see how strong you come out of it. For example, I see a lot of people talking about, redefining the culture, so to say. I have a basic problem with that. I don't think you have to redefine the culture whenever a crisis happens. It'll be good enough you can just define your culture very, very well. That's really what I personally work in. I have worked in some top-notch organizations. I advise some startups in my personal capacity, of course. Culture is not about making some employees display a certain set of behaviors and tell them that, what you have to act in these certain ways only, right? Because if employees start working in similar ways, then you'll have no innovation, no creativity, and no transformation. We have all these training programs where we send people to be for a 2-hour training program and expect them to come out being creative. That does not happen, right? It is like a rubber band. You can train them, stretch it, but it stretches back in the same position. Culture for us, for Brigadia context, as you asked the question, is really up there in the mindset, right? But still, even though it's a mindset, it's an attitude, but still we believe it is very, very well defined, and also it is very, very actionable. If you to define Brigadia's culture, we call it as a shared commitment to self-accountability. That's what we say, right? And through that commitment, we actually see what impact we have on others. And these others are your managers, your teams, your peers, and your customers. See, when you understand how your actions can impact others, each of the 4 corners, then you are accountable to behave in a way that you are supposed to be, right? It's been so powerful, and this culture has been there with Brigadia pretty much since the time we started this transformation journey about 2.5 years back. And this helped us so much, Gopi, and as we try to withstand the first few weeks of crisis. While despite the initial challenges, we still have our culture of innovation, collaboration, and creativity very much, very, very impactful. One more thing quickly, what we do in Brigadia, we have as a culture, we try to keep our communication very, very open, very honest. We believe that even as leaders, we need to be very, very vulnerable and share bad news and share the fact that there are things we don't know. And in fact, I'm reminded of the last town hall we had with our CFO and CEO, and we are showing that graph about how our business is looking like, how financials is looking like, right? Our last crisis happened in the year 2007, 2008. I'm talking about the recession about 12 years back, and that recession happened in our industry, in the financial services industry, especially in the real estate industry, right? At that time, the impact was bad. But let me tell you, the impact right now is even worse than what it had at that point of time. So we are very transparent to tell our people, that employees, that this is what the reality is, and there are things that we have to gear up for, and things are not looking too bright, but we are all in this together. So my point was that having that open and honest conversation and sharing the bad news, and clearly saying as leaders also that, what, we don't know certain things, right? If you know, let us know. That is very important for us, and that's something I think kept Brigadia very, very strong as a culture so far.
Thanks, Debashish. And I think that's a very interesting point, right? Not all of us know what's going to happen right now, and that is where the challenge of looking at anything in the last 2 months. How could we even give anybody a direction or a vision, especially when things were so uncertain? And that I don't know is always okay to say. And I think that is really coming out now. But to Rama's point earlier, the money question, right? Let's talk about the most important thing for startups, the cash flow. Till now, investors funded the startups to focus on growth and business model refinement, way more than for revenue or profitability. That was the growth was most important. And earlier, I think Abhijit also touched upon the point that now we are maybe relooking at EBITDA as a point, maybe not immediately, but at some point in time. But with investment effectively funding cash flow deficit, right? Abhijit, is there money still available for deployment now? What are you seeing changing now with respect to focus of sectors, business models, investment models in itself?
So, a very interesting question, Gopi. I think uh, investors are now becoming more matured, as I said before. Uh, I would, put up a line like 2009 was a year of valuation. Now 2020 will be a year of cash flows. So now investors are not gonna only buy the story on valuation and futuristic projection. So I will tell you, previously, if you say, okay, I'll attain a revenue of 50 crore in 3 years, investors think, okay, even if the guys attains maybe achieves 50% of that, I am good enough, I'm happy for that. But now if you can't do such random projections, you can't survive on that. So you have to do very realistic projections, keeping the pandemic into picture, keeping the the negative effects of pandemic into picture, how you're going to survive. Most of the heavily funded businesses, as you rightly mentioned, the losses are funded by investors. But now investors are not going to do that. They are going to pick the winner out of their investment portfolio also. So they are also going to evaluate which startup might survive this next 6 months and 1 year. I would rather bet on that, rather than maybe saving that one or two winner, rather than keep investing money on those 10. So this is going to be much more challenging for startups now, because they'll have to prove their worth to investors much more. So we are also, maybe previously our criteria, shortlisting criteria, investment criteria would be 5 or 6. Now it has increased to 10. So now we are talking about how you're going to become profitable. What is the path to it? Not immediately, but next 3 years down the line, are you going to become profitable? So a lot of these kind of questions have started coming up for early stage investments.
You're on mute, Gopi.
Thank you. Rama, you touched upon this about a lot of startups needing money, to survive through this, and they obviously can't look desperate right now to be able to go to an investor on this particular one. How will they survive this?
Yeah, I think tough one. As I said, we are trying to find out ways of how they can survive and how we can extend the lifeline, so to say, right, for people who are struggling, who have a limited runway. How can one, I think some people already mentioned, you try and extend your runway, cut costs, go deeper, whatever is needed. So that will help you for some more time, which is good. Are there ways to kind of, look at grants that are hard to tap into? Are there, debt capital available from the banking financial world? So those are things that, which is in our control. We are trying to at least bring the players to the table. Obviously, it's not an easy one, right? I mean, if you kind of ask the founders, nobody likes raising on debt unless you have started to see a lot of money come in, or at least visibility of those money, right? I mean, that's the whole reason of why you kind of put out equity and you kind of reduce the risk, have cash in hand, build the business. So I think, and debt also, from a bank is not as easy as one would think, right? I mean, you have to produce a whole bunch of documentation. You need to look at what all you're doing, and they have their whatever way of looking at it, right? They're not like say Abhijit or a modern age, angel group who may say, you know what, I like what you guys are doing. I see where you are headed, and I think I'm ready to kind of at least dip in my toe, if not the whole leg, right? So I think they are not that. They'll just kind of stick to their books. So it's a challenge. We're trying to work through that and figure out ways. And it is again the case of even for whether it is angel or a higher order investor, when time is bad, they get extra cautious, right? There is a lot more fear than needs to be, and when it is open, there is a lot more euphoria than it needs to be. And I think Abhijit touched on it very nicely, that you will try to average your bets, right? You will have to kind of back your horses that you already did. If they are under trouble, then you have almost like a onus or a moral responsibility. So I think that takes away the other bucket of money that I would have invested otherwise in newer startups. Would have got that portion for them, right? So I think that is not happening. That's like being like putting all of those things on the back burner, and only thing is I'm going to double down on my taken bets, and I've taken the bets for a reason. So yes, I will double down. There is not much to go about unless it has really hit rock bottom or something. So I think a lot of the things not going for people who have not raised, and they are the ones who are really kind of bearing the brunt, which is okay, right? I think market has its own way of cleansing ideas that are either taking too much time, or if this is not the best of thing where people are not ready to vote with their money. And there's a lot of people who will vote with their mouth and say, what, great, you should go build. But unless they kind of put the money on the table, that means they are still not there. So sometimes it's okay if things don't work, and maybe it's just kind of best for even the startup or the founders that, what, I'll do something new, different, something much more viable, meaning.
Thanks, Shama. That makes sense. I think try and figure out a way to kind of make through this, and but let's also see what Rohit has to say, because they're a well-funded startup, and I think it's not been long ago that you've raised another round. Was there any plans to for the next round already? Is that something that your timeline you're going to stick to with the next round, or is something that you want to push out for now?
So I think we didn't have a plan, Gopi, to raise our next round anytime soon. I think the good part about SaaS itself is it's better on the cash flows. It's better on the margins. Of course, we invest for growth, we invest for new market expansion, etc. I think that's something where we need when we raise money for the next phase of growth. So I think at least the timeline, the amount of money that we have, the runway that we had planned for, that will come down, or our next fundraising will happen probably earlier than before, planned before. But it's still like more than a year and a half away. So at least that way, in terms of how we planned for it, was that we don't have to at any time soon. But on the other hand, I think definitely valuations are crunched. I do talk to a lot of founder friends who are trying to raise their next round. So we just got lucky, right? Like we raised before this happened. I think it's just luck of the draw or luck of timing that it happened. I mean, I think all of us, I mean, any of us could have been in a situation where we would be desperate to raise at this point of time, because I mean, it was not planned for, right? The raise that we did was also not planned for. So it was that way. I think this is not the best time to raise for sure. But I think one thing that we are not clear about, and I think that's where we should spend a lot of time figuring it out, is how bad is this going to get, right? So we do know that medium to long term, most of it's net positive for most digital or digital enabling startups, right? So when to hold on money till, and if you have the money in the bank, and there are companies which are in a worse position, unfortunately, because of the timing, but who have money in the bank, I think when to hold on money till and when to start spending, and when to look at that, oh, the curve is going up and now we should press the accelerator, is something that we are trying to figure out, right? Like what are the signs, what are the telltale signs that, okay, I think the market is recovering, the market is going to recover at this speed. How do you pick up speed from here, right? And that means we need to hire, that means we need to go into new markets, all of that. So all those things, I think the choice of when to invest that money, right, is very important. How much to invest, right? So I think for us today, that's one big question that we are dealing with internally, right? Today we are not spending a lot of money. We at least some of the grand expansion plans we had around new markets, etc., we've held on to. We said, okay, we will do it, but this will be postponed by 1, 2, 3 quarters depending on how the market is. right? So I think that's where we are in terms of where we need to invest money, and more importantly, when. And that's what we are going through as an organization.
Thanks, Rohit. I think so far, predominantly in India, the investments have come in from venture capitalists, from angels, etc. We have not seen that many corporate investments. Debashish, is this something something that is being discussed in the corporate environment? Important is more than any, is one of the most important thing right now. And based on what the other panelists had said, sometimes innovation comes best from startups. Would startups be open more than before to invest in startups now? Sorry, would corporates be more than ever to invest in startups now?
Absolutely. And I can talk from what I see from my own organizations. My parent organization is Berkshire Hathaway, of course, and we all know that we are 100% committed to have a long-term vision. We always invest for the long term. In the recent call that we had, I think Mr. Buffett made it very clear that anytime a good investment opportunity comes in, he would invest. Right? That has always been his mantra. But if you also look at what I see and hear, and of course Rohit and Abhijit are obviously more closer to the ground. But if I read and see where I have seen the last two to 3 weeks, the report on Anand Mahindra, and he was looking for a company to invest for the last 20 years or 10 years, he said, and finally he got an idea to invest in. That's a very powerful statement that he made. There are also reports about Ratan Tata investing in a startup, right? So I think what I see from my own organization, I think investors are absolutely sitting on or are ready to invest for the right ideas, because for some of us, I think cash is not a problem. For the large organizations or be investors, we're just looking for the right idea and the right people who are leading that idea, right? And you will always have Ratan Tatas and Anil Mahindras and Warren Buffett is gunning for you. I know these are very famous names, but other names also would invest. But I would still be slightly positive in this market as well, because investors look at value, right? And this market, you can get a value if you have the right idea.
Thanks, Abhishek. Let me ask you for a follow-up. While we looked at the CEOs and the folks are investing from their personal side, do corporates have any model of investing directly into startups and working with them, taking an equity stake and investing in them?
So I don't think there is any standard model that I have seen as a trend, right? If there are investment organizations like Berkshire Hathaway essentially is an investment organization. When it is Berkshire is owned by it, but otherwise Mr. Buffett has grown his business by investing, right? We would like in our, and good reminded me of that, we also as a Berkshire also, we're very in this interesting cusp of where we are today, right? We are in a commercial real estate market, and we are between an investor who wants to invest in a commercial property and a lender, typically a bank, right? So if you want to invest in a commercial real estate property, I'll help you find a lender. So for me, you are the customer, the bank also is a customer, because he needs me to sell that loan, right? So it's very interesting because in this space, some companies have obviously not been valuated. The valuations have come down for some companies. We are very strong. We have great, backup. But we are very, very open to work with some great technology companies in these startups. While we are investing a lot ourselves, but if we think there's somebody can add value to our what you already have, we are absolutely open to invest in that as well. Because for us, I don't think money as of now is a problem. Where to invest and long term is something that you're looking at.
Absolutely, the uncertainty now, right? What do we do? How do things pan out over the next 6 months? Absolutely, that is what we're all looking at. I mean, and we've been seeing a lot of demand shift, particularly demand shifting on the shift towards the right for the technology-based startups, and to the left on a lot of obviously on the retail side, on the hospitality side, and so on. If I may ask Rama, who's been seeing a lot of different startups, you know, have there been any segments that were immune to this virus market, right? Or immune to COVID-19? Um, who has seen the greatest shift in one way or the other?
Um, you're asking from a startup standpoint in terms of focus emphasis, or the corporate looking at
From,
startups, or
from a demand shifter that we've been seeing for different types of startups, those who've seen a significant jump in demand, all conditions being same, and those who've seen a significant lowering of demand with
sure.
sectors.
I think it's pretty easy, and we are contributors to that. Some of the startups that have really kind of multiplied are like gaming startups that they have gone like 5x on revenues, 10x on subscribers. So obviously, we many of us are at home, and between all the 12 hours of calls and work that we do, depending on what age group you are, gaming seems to have really kind of picked up a lot. So there is a lot of traction there, which is good for them. There is a lot of obviously consumption on all things like content, OTT, obviously your Amazon Primes and Netflix. So I think there is quite a lot of demand on the complete value chain of entertainment, whether you are a technology provider in the OTT space, whether you're providing content, fresh content is really, really hot today. All of that entire segment is like, on the entertainment sector is really kind of plumb right now. The other thing obviously is like, e-commerce delivery, last mile. I think that has kind of seen a lot of like shift as well as demand, because obviously all of us are ordering a lot more from home. We don't want to venture out. So I think that there's a lot of fine tuning for some of the big boys who are doing how they do, but there's a lot of smaller people who have tried to carve out a niche in terms of how do you help. There has been a lot of traction for startups like, for example, like MyGate, which does like technology for apartment complexes. So they have a lot of traction already. So they are kind of trying to see like partnership. They are trying to push a lot of new value adds. For example, they now collate like a lot of this newspapers and magazines and provide digital format of that for people who are on the app. So that's like an added feature, and given another push towards digitization and how people can now consume content because of the fear of not wanting to kind of touch the papers. So I think there is a lot of such things. Whenever there is a market shift or disruption, there are a lot of new players who kind of come on board, and there are some who really kind of take off from there at the cost of some people else conventional, which kind of not looked at. The other area that we are really seeing a lot of ask is everything to do with work from home. Whether how do you create everything from an atmosphere for you to be effective, to be efficient, both on non-software side as well as software. Non-software is like most of our homes are not equipped like for kind of doing long hours of work from home. So there is a lot of push and emphasis there. Then obviously if you add the tech layer of it, which is all types of electronics, gear, broadband, bandwidth, you would not believe. I mean, like I was talking to a senior executive in North America for Logitech. Their sales have gone through the roof. So think about like an accessorial company, like headset, earphone. Their sales have zoomed, and obviously Zoom is there. That's a nice corollary word that came out. So Zoom is like like been hit crazy, and we are on Zoom, so great. So I think these are some of the guys who have really kind of picked up on this and done pretty well. The whole space of unified communication, voice, video, collaboration, data, any of those segments, and as I said, like home bandwidth, ensuring there is security, quality of service, the right bandwidth, and ensuring that people are able to do their work well. That entire segment is also really heated up. You're on mute, Gopi.
Thank you. To that mix, I'll add standing working desks, and it's something that I've recently picked up, and it's so difficult to find. With everybody working from home and sitting down, everybody started realizing, I think maybe a little bit of
Yeah.
standing during the day is very useful.
Let me know if you find a
Uh,
good one. Do share it with us as well.
I will. I actually picked up one. I'll test this out, and I'll
Sure.
let you know.
Yeah.
Uh, Rama, in the last couple, so with this shift, are you also seeing new startups coming about, or is this existing startups shifting? And what are the areas of the new startups coming in, taking advantage of this virus market?
So yes, I think there are a lot of new startups that have come. Either they are somebody who has been doing like an IT services, and then this was a good idea, so let me start now. Or there are some people who have really kind of jumped on it and said, you know what, there seems to be an opportunity. I think there is going to be a challenge in the co-working space. So how do I kind of come pick up something which is at a bargain and then create a different business model? Or can I be an enabler of sort for some of those people who are challenged for business? For example, commercial real estate is going to be hit very hard. Not many people are going to go back. Not many people are expanding. Many of the people are getting very comfortable with working from home. Percentage of people may not even go back. So what do you do with all those existing real estate one, which is an easier problem, but what do you do with all the forward looking build up that has happened on the commercial real estate, and people are not buying on their contracts and reneging on that, right? What do you do with all those supplies? What do you do with all those built up of material, people, resources? So I think some of the startups are trying to look at how can you redeploy those in others, create a more digital first approach. One is that, and the second is at the start of the call I said that a lot of people who are trying to fill in like smaller pieces of the puzzle in the whole COVID challenge, whether it is like trying to kind of make like electronic hardware gadgets for looking at like say thermal scanners if you are of that kind, or going digital and discovering like data, uh, ventilators and whatnot across like hospitals across city, helping digitize, looking at data, looking at like patient tracking, how the spread happens, how do you ensure that you are far away from people who have it, or be able to eradicate that and ensure that the administrators have a lot more better dashboard and data to make like better choices. There has been a lot of startups that have hit the entire COVID challenge, or a response to the COVID challenge. There has been at least 100 startups that I know of, either who have morphed into from existing ones or newer ones that have got into. Obviously, many of them are like the PPEs or the newer ways of doing like dynamic beds where you can like fold and carry. So many of them are not really like pure IT software, but many of them are hardware-ish manufacturing types, and then the other bulk are like digital and software oriented. But yeah, a lot of people are jumping into ideas and saying that this is an opportunity, and we want people to look at not only the negative part, but can I do some? But I am kind of a little bit of a believer that you pick people who are already on to something, stick to that, and kind of if you're really kind of dying, then yeah, you need to kind of make some money. But other than that, I would kind of go down the path that I have chosen.
Thanks, Rama.
Yeah.
I think from the investment perspective, how's the demand shift been? And let me ask Abhijit on this. Abhijit, you mentioned earlier, looking at the entire portfolio, trying to identify who's the one that is going to do best and survive, and back that as a winning horse. Is this one of those determining factors going to be the demand shift? Which of your investee startups are seeing a really nice uptick? Which sector are they in? And what sector are you foreseeing in the future that will have a very positive outcome?
Yeah, Gopi, before I take this question, I think this I would request that this would be my last question. I had a hard stop at 6, but I kind of extended a little bit. So I would take this question and then I would excuse myself. Have a small baby at home whose sleeping time is starts now. So that's why.
No worries at all, Abhijit. I mean, feel free. We'll cover it.
So
Thank you.
I think the sectors, a lot of them, Rama have already covered. The sectors which are picking up or would be picking up. I find a few sectors which are very interesting and gonna, be out, which are very conventional in nature, but now are will be open to investors. Sanitation, I think, is one sector which is going to open for investors. Hygiene was already picking up a lot of hygiene B2C players where their startups were coming up, but now hygiene is going to become one of the favorite sectors of investors. Healthcare is already picking up a lot. Healthcare was always a favorite. Education was always one of the top sectors to raise funds, but education, I think now even B2B SaaS would see a lot of excitement from investors, because heavy people, startups which are working on remote solutions or video kind of products, video based products, those are picking up. So but a lot of old style conventional sectors which require innovation would also pick up. B2C will pick up. So consumer goods, I think we are also heavily looking at consumer goods for the next year, because it would be interesting to see, because now a lot of people are going to order home, so people are going to experiment more, because you can order home, so you want to try new products rather than going to a kirana shop where you don't want to waste so much time and you just pick up whatever you are used to. But with the more online ordering happening, people will be open to trying new products. In the last 3 months, I have already tried 10 new products, and some of them have worked, quite beautifully well. So I would love to see consumer goods shaping up well in the near future. And I think, except that the some of the sectors badly being affected, I don't see hospitality will see the light of the sun in near future. Maybe 6 months down the line, travel will have tough time until there is some innovative model which can come out and kind of disrupt travel. So I think overall these are the sectors which I think would make or break.
Thank you, Abhijit, and we'll let you to your rest of the evening. Thanks so much for joining.
Thanks a lot for having me here, and thanks a lot to the TruePush team, and thanks Gopi, and thanks other panelists. Pleasure meeting you. Thank you.
Take care, Abhijit, later.
Thanks, Abhijit.
Bye.
Rohit, jumping to you, how's the demand been for your services, and how is the funnel looking? We've spoken directly over this briefly. Can you share a little of how is that evolving?
Yeah, so I think so. Again, as a sector, we focus on mid to large enterprises as our client base. So maybe average size of about 3,000 employee companies, but range from about 500 employee companies to 40,000 employee companies is our customers. So what we've seen is, as you see in the market everywhere, right? They're talking about this being the fastest influencer of digitization, more than a CEO or a CTO or a CIO in any organization. While that is a joke, that seems to be real. So I think there is definite interest among companies we thought would be late adopters of technology, right? So some sectors like infrastructure, etc., which conventionally have not used as much technology, have suddenly started showing interest. So I think that's there. So if I have to break it up in the mid to long term, given how we've seen this interest in terms of newer companies coming into use technology, is definitely exciting. So there is going to be a higher demand for products or products of our kind in most organizations. Most organizations will want to digitize their internal functions and customer facing functions. So that's a mid to long term. The short term pain, I think, is coming from the fact that companies are in a limbo to invest, right? So they're not making that investment decision while they're doing the research, while they're finding out a little more about the product, understanding the last step, which is putting down the check or signing on the contract, where they need to start paying. I think that's where people are holding and watching. So there is pain in the short term, because the limbo of not knowing what's coming next or how long this is going to be is actually making customers also not take decisions. Having said that, there is a very high inflow in the top of the funnel, so as to say in sales jargon, which is inquiries to understand what is Darwinbox, what are all the suite of offerings, what can we do with this, is something that we've seen as an increase in demand. So I think I would definitely say it's net positive for most sectors or most spaces that startups are going after, except the travel and hospitality space, and maybe a little bit of retail space, because it is accelerating everything, right? It is accelerating e-commerce in general, and that spreads across B2B, B2C, everywhere. It is accelerating digitization in general, and that again spreads across B2B and B2C. It is accelerating all the removal of intermediaries, right? A lot of our startups are about removal of intermediaries in between a transaction, right? So whatever we were doing with 4 or 5 intermediaries, we are trying to aggregate, and this is through marketplaces, etc. That's also going to happen, right? We will not need so many intermediaries if it's not physical and it's a lot more digital, etc. So I think it is net positive for most spaces, but how quickly that you'll see the positiveness in that demand shift is only time will tell, right? Like things like OTT, gaming, Zoom, etc. I've seen it already and are continuing to see it. Even like I was talking to a friend who runs a SaaS startup for schools, and he had to integrate Zoom, Microsoft Teams, Google Meet, everything into his platform. And this was over like just in 2-3 weeks before the school started. And most schools are starting to do these conversations or having online classes. My daughter is a 3-year-old girl, and they have online classes for her. I mean, while principally I'm against it, the entrepreneur in me is very happy that a lot of people are using technology much more than they used to, right? So I think there's definitely demand shift, which is exciting in the mid to long term. When do we see that in actual cash flows or actual conversions is something that we're watching for.
Thanks, Roy. That's really interesting. And my son's 5 years old, and his school just started again earlier this week. And the school's actually trying to figure out in a combination of Zoom and Google Classroom, but not all content translates from offline to online, especially at those ages, right? And we've seen Karnataka banning schools for under 5. It's a very interesting phase, and it's one of those things where learning can't stop, especially at that age. So how does that shift happen? So for most of the audience, here's another cue. I mean, here's another sector that is ripe for innovation now, because the solutions are required in the next few weeks. With that, I want to jump into the next question. I want to leave it open for all the panelists. Startups are the popular hubs of, are popularly the hubs of innovation. And in a business environment of this, the virus market, the reliability of established organizations definitely seems safer, right? So you want to go to the bigger corporates for your solutions, etc. But innovation is the need of the hour, and either to thrive or even to survive. So our organization insourcing innovation, trying to hold on to that, and then outsourcing all their process and capabilities out and let somebody else handle it? Or are they now more aggressively outsourcing innovation to partners or to startups? I'll let anybody take that up.
I can go first, if that is fine. Okay.
Yes.
It's a very interesting question. If I look at Berkadia, Gopi, for the last 40 years, we have in this financial services business, right? And for the last of the 40, almost 35 years, we are not investing in technology because the industry did not demand that so much. Only in last 5 years time, and when we started thinking about, in technology is the way to go forward, so we have to invest in it. Now we had the same question in our mind, that should we insource or should we outsource? That was a big decision you have to take, because you are fundamentally a financial services company. You had nothing to do with anything about technology. But the decision actually we took was to insource and not outsource. And today, about 3 years back, we're about 25 employees in IT innovation in Berkadia, and in India I'm talking about, and today you have 250. So almost like 25% of my workforce in India, globally is about 30%, which is innovation. So significant investment in innovation, and it's a big decision taken. Now, to your question about why we do this, right? Why insource versus outsource? I think for us and for me personally also, the decision actually, it is to check 3 boxes for me really, right? One is that what in the long term, do you think technology in your industry should be a disruptor and you want to get there before others do, right? If it is a disruptor in the industry and if we get there before others do, then answer is yes. In that case, I think you should in-source and not outsource, because you want to be the sole disruptor, right? And we had that opportunity because this industry really, to be very clear, is a laggard in terms of investment in technology. So we checked that box. We said, no, we will in-source because it can potentially be a disruptor. Second checkbox that we felt important was that, do we want innovation to be an enabler or be at the bottom line, or do we want it to contribute to the top line, by building our own products and services? In our case also, we wanted to be a top line. We wanted to build our own products and services and go to the market and sell it. So if you see that, it also was a very clear decision for us to, I think it made sense for us to in-source it. Third, I think is equally important is that if you want to build long-term capabilities about of your people and of your process, then I think it also makes sense to have a insourcing rather than outsourcing. Now, not to say that, that's why we decided, that's why I think companies should decide. These 3 boxes should be checked. There could be others, but that comes to my mind immediately. But not to take away the benefits of really outsourcing, right? You have obviously huge benefits of cost savings, right? No initial investment. You have access to large talent pool. You have there's a risk mitigation already happening continuously. There is you can focus on your core business, right? So those are things obviously is a big advantage when you decide to outsource. But for us, it was more of an insourcing decision for Brigadia.
Thank you.
So I think
Sorry.
one addition to what Debashish has said, I think is you can always in-source is what I think, right? Like you can always in-source anything except for 2 things that you need to check about. One is focus and second is cost, right? If this is not something that you want to put all your energies on building the best of, right, it's better to outsource, right? Because there is something else that you can put all your energies on. And that could be what is core to your business. And the second thing is cost itself, right, which Debashish has also mentioned, right? There is obviously a cost consideration on if it is cheaper to get it done outside at the same quality, of course, not compromising on some stuff, right, with the baselines or guardrails in place. I think definitely there. But I've seen choices that most organizations make based on focus, right? Our clients, Paytm is a client, Swiggy is a client, Myntra is a client, Big Basket is a client. All these are clients of ours who have great technology folks, even much better than us, right? And they could have built a system themselves, but they wanted to build a system for their core business, right? I don't think we can match up in terms of their number of engineers that they have by even 10% or 15%, right? So but the focus was that they could have put aside a few, that means they could have put aside 10-15% of the team and built this up. But they said, okay, I want to focus. It's not even the cost, right? They could have actually bought the cost also, right? So it's about focus. And I think that choice, and as Debashish was saying, for them, they decided that that's going to be a focus in the future and they made that choice. But yeah, I think it's a more question of focus. Otherwise, insourcing everything is a better answer everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? Like it's all your IP then.
Yeah. And I can't agree with you more, Rohit. I think, to be honest, we are backed by Berkshire Hathaway. So frankly, money is not a problem, but not everybody has that benefit, to be honest. It's not that you just go and in-source things, right? And focus was there because we wanted to build our own products. We had 40 years of experience, which others don't have. We had huge client relationships, right? We're talking about an investment when somebody is buying a commercial property about millions of dollars. So we could build on to that with that relationship and sell that product to that existing customer. So I think it made more sense to us to in-source rather than outsource. But money and focus were extremely important. I can't agree with you more.
Gopi, you're on mute.
Thank you, Rama. Cool. Thanks so much. And I want to, most of my questions are done. I want to jump into a couple of audience questions. Keertan had asked, what is the scenario going, with this scenario continue here to stay? What are the future of office workspaces? Rama, do you want to share your thought on this?
Um, well, I think tough one. I mean, I didn't prepare the answer for this, so but I'll give the answer that I prepared, right? So I think it's a tough one, right? We don't know how things are going to emerge. I was hearing an interview from the WeWork guys, right? They seem to kind of put a very brave face, and the way they're looking at it is they're saying that what, with all the social distancing, etc. I think it is what has happened is the per SFT consumption per person that you keep aside has increased. What that actually means is we need to go and procure more buildings, which is 5x from here or 10x from here. So they are seeing a rampant growth for their customers. They are not seeing that people are not going to come back. Their view is people will come back. You just need to provide them more hygiene, more social distancing norms and all of that to make them comfortable for now. And then obviously everybody's waiting for the silver bullet or the vaccine to show up at some point, which is anybody's guess at this point. Seems like early next year. At that point, I'm hoping we humans are also very funny animals that way, right? Maybe there'll be a Q1 where we'll go back to the same thing where we were, forgetting all of this once we take our shots, right? So you never know. I mean, it's so hard to kind of predict one way from the other. So I think for the space standpoint, the current challenges are pretty huge. If you take a tactical view of a couple of quarters, I talked about, I've been talking with our partners like JLL, CBRE, all of those guys. They are under pretty tight conditions where their business is really gone for a toss in terms of existing customers, rents that need to come from existing leases, forward-looking projections, like cancellation of existing contracts for expansion. So all of that is not a good telltale. Coupled with the fact that many of the organizations have now gone on record saying that, what, we are good. I mean, work from home is working phenomenally well. I don't think people have to take a break with their family, go down for a walk or anything, right? We'll just put them call after call, 12 hours, 14 hours, no worries. So seems to be they're happy with using the people. So there has to be a balance there. But I think leaving that the fun part aside, I think people have felt comfortable with this whole work from home paradigm, efficiency. I think Rohit touched on that. All of the startups are very comfortable. For them, it is some people who are less on cash and business, reduced cost. You don't need to pay for your workplaces. Focus on your people, and obviously these are all close knit team, right? When you're in your 10-20 member team, it is very close knit. You exactly know who the people are. You don't need to see them. They work. You have a mission, so it is at a very less cost. You're able to kind of build a product, forward your mission, and do all the right things. So I think positive there, but in general, I think the space is is hurt right now.
Thanks, Rama. One last question I'll go for. I think we're on the top of the hour. Rekha had, actually two folks have a similar question. This is in the sports and media industry and in the training by Diana Tali of GHAC and Outlive. With the events and trainings mostly being conducted offline, sports trainings being offline, now some of these things really can't be moved on online, right? So what is the future of spaces like this, of sectors like this?
You mean trading? You're on mute.
Training with respect, sports training and adventure or corporate offline trainings. What is the outlook for them?
Yeah, sports training, I'll pass it to Rohit or Dev to answer. I don't have an answer. For the corporate training, I'll answer. I think most of the trainings today have gone online, if we have not seen already, right? I mean, in fact, I have kind of taken advantage of a Coursera, a Udemy, etc. and I've tried to sharpen some of my skills. So today, I think we all, if not feeling comfortable, I think we need to kind of get there. Most people have graduated. I know, and Rohit was saying, Rohit has a 3-year one. I have a 6-year one. So they are like, they know exactly, like, mute, unmute, everything, like, go out, go, come back. They have like sorted. So I think they are kind of getting trained virtually, digital, and many of us, all types of training, right? Whether it is, I've seen music, I have seen yoga, I have seen gym, I have seen obviously all types of, like, corporate training, classical like ours, all types of webinars. Many of things have gone online. I'll give you another example. There is in our complex, there is this basketball coach, right? Sports for your example. How do you kind of now do basketball, right? I mean, you can't. So he's now kind of gone on Zoom, and he's now giving, like, people, like, skills, use their balls and just kind of, at least like try how do you keep your hand gesture, make them run, jump, and parents are happy that they're getting some exercise out of it. So obviously you can't mimic the whole thing, but I think we have started to adapt what best today. I think people are thinking and innovating at different levels. So that's my answer. I'll have Rohit kind of fill in the rest for me.
I'm so happy that you think I have some sports going on in my life, but I also wish that is happening. But I would say I obviously don't have an answer, but just like schools will restart sometime, I think sports will restart as well. There's going to be a pause. It's not like it's a forever answer. Probably it will be 6 months, maybe 1 year. Unfortunate again. But I think people are trying to stay fit. We had done a webinar with Gopi Chand at Darwin Box, and he spoke beautifully about coaching, etc. He said, I mean, there's some things that you can do at home, which is getting fitter, right? And let's get fit, and then we'll play when we have to. I think one-on-one sports, etc., still can happen. I think that will come back 3 months from now, maybe, right? If you have to practice something as a one-on-one sport. Maybe group sports will take a little longer. It's a pause. It's not something that's not going away, but it'll come back is what I think. You're on mute again.
Thank you. I'm still getting used to this. I'm so used to Teams. Still getting used to it. I think we have 5 minutes over, gentlemen. Thank you so much for your inputs. I personally learned a lot, and I think the audience also has learned a lot. There is a lot of insights, and if you're looking at starting up now or are already in startup, I hope this has been valuable and insightful. I think this will also help you make some of those decisions, some of those clarity. I think clarity or more clarity. I think for all of us, we are going through this. Rohit and I, when I was talking the other day, he was saying he's never said, I don't know more than in the last few months. I think that is the situation for all of us, right? There are a lot of uncertainty, but there is also a lot of hope. I think that is how a lot of us have gone through. Things in India are going to be challenging for the foreseeable future, at least, and uncertain, but we will make it through. And I wish you all the very best. And I'd just like to share something that one of our leadership team at Microsoft had shared with us and said, take care of yourself, be patient with others, and if you need it, please reach out for help. Thank you. With that, I'll sign off too. Over to you, Tina.
Thank you so much, Gopi, and all the speakers today present with us. So on behalf of TruePush, I would like to thank all of you. Also, in fact, we received instant feedbacks that the event is really good, and it's not promotional at all, which was our main focus for the event. It should be useful to everyone who is attending this. So TruePush Talks is coming up with a lot of webinars in the future, and in fact, very soon. So I hope you guys would join the events. Of course, we would share the links and everything, and we would make sure that the event is useful to everyone. So thank you so much on behalf of TruePush, and have a great evening, everyone.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Thank you all. Have a great evening. Bye.
Bye.